Hello to our 8 subscribers. Today I am filming from house sit number 4, which is in the small village of San Andres Oayapam, just outside the city of Oaxaca in Mexico. We are currently sitting 8 dogs and 3 cats, so I am hoping that there will be some adorable animal footage behind me during the course of this video. But today I'm going to talk about house sit number 2. We have some house sits to catch up on, so I would like to go over our experience with house sit number 2 in Guanajuato City in Guanajuato State, Mexico. The duration of the house sit was 10 days in the end of April. We booked this one via the website housesitmexico.com, which if you've watched my previous house sit videos, you'll remember that that website is the only expense that I've paid for making house sit listings. It was $90 a year. And I would say, even though this is the only house sit out of our 6 booked so far that we booked through housesitmexico.com, that $90 has probably already paid for itself, and I do anticipate that we'll get some more bookings through there before our year is up. The pets at this house sit were 5 lovely chickens, a small flock of lady hens. The responsibilities that we had were to feed the chickens twice a day, collect the eggs daily, monitor their water, and because they were free range, they had full access to an entire beautiful terraced garden area that was also a public area for their rentals and short-term rentals that shared the patios. Daily we had to scoop their poop and compost that. And of course we open and close the coop in the morning and the night. And I would say the biggest responsibility, or the most time-consuming responsibility with this house sit, was watering the big, beautiful terraced garden. In addition to that, we also had some various duties regarding the fact that the building was a multi-unit rental. Just some minor things. She had envelopes of payments for us to pay the housekeepers on certain days, and a few times she had some last-minute bookings. We were responsible for collecting the payments and putting those in envelopes for her. It was 10 days, and of course we really enjoyed the time with the chickens. The other perks of the house are that it had an absolutely amazing view of Guanajuato, so even though we were exhausted when we got there, this was right after our 6-week just whirlwind road trip through Mexico, and then we had 2 weeks at our first house sit, which was work exchange, so that wasn't a very restful experience. So when we arrived at house sit number 2 in Guanajuato, we were just ready to crash. However, the view just woke up the photographer inside of me, so I spent a lot of time taking pictures of the chickens and this amazing landscape. It's got to be one of the most beautiful views in all of Guanajuato. As you can just see all the houses around, and it's incredible. Of course, the chickens were a major perk. It was a beautiful home. It was very luxurious. We felt pretty spoiled to be able to stay there. It had 2 private patios, and I think Evan's favorite perk is that we had a wood-fired pizza oven. So we made pizza a few times, experimented with some sourdough pizza crust. So let's move over to some photos. To start off, I'm going to run through a series of photos that I took from different points in their large terraced garden overlooking the city of Guanajuato below. And I tried over the course of our 10 days there to get a number of shots from different points of day, because it just changed dramatically throughout the day but was always beautiful. So here we have some morning light, a wider view of Guanajuato in the morning. Here's evening, later in the evening. This is shortly before sunset when all those little lights on the houses start lighting up. This was moments before the full moon rose from behind the mountains. And the following morning, this was Easter Sunday morning, and this was just moments before the sun rose from behind the mountains. Moving on to some pictures of their property. This is the biggest part of their terraced garden, but continuing down those steps, there's multiple other levels down below. And this is the part of their patio that was shared with the long-term and short-term rental guests, but as I mentioned earlier, we almost completely had it to ourselves. It was just us and the 5 hens almost the whole time. So it really felt like we had the patio to ourselves. They had a number of guests. They seemed really well booked, but most of the guests were very happy to content themselves down in the city of Guanajuato instead of resting on the patio. Here you can see a huge variety of plants that they have in their garden, and they spoke to us a bit about their planning process, and they worked with a number of professionals to bring in certain plants that would really cultivate their own little ecosystem, and I think they did a really good job. There was all kinds of just insects and different kinds of birds and all kinds of life just buzzing around. It really felt like they'd done a really good job selecting the plants based on that, as well as just being beautiful. Here's another view looking back. The house is on the right and the studio is on the left. This is another view from a different level. And this was part of the private part of our yard that we were able to use. So the house sit hosts, they do also live on site. So we were staying in their house, which is part of a multi-unit building that they completely built and renovated themselves. So moving on to my favorite part of the video, which is of course the chickens. You can see them in the door of their coop there. I want to start first by talking a little bit about the coop. It was an excellent design. I really admire a lot about their coop design. You can tell right off the bat that it is it's pretty, it's pleasing to the eye, but it is very safe, very predator proof. They have chain link with the smaller strong wire behind it, and it goes all the way up to the ceiling. Nothing's going to get inside this coop. The door is securely closed at night and open in the morning. Inside the coop, they have a wood shaving bedding, which was also really nice and easy for cleaning up their droppings. They wanted us to scoop up the droppings daily from inside the house, inside the coop, as well as around the terraced garden, and that all went in their compost bin. And the wood shaving bedding was not only just easy to clean and good for the hens, but it was, I'm sure it's a great cost saver for them as their woodworking studio produces a lot of wood shavings. You can also see the coop has very high ceilings, so it's easy for people to go in and out as well as chickens, and the high ceilings probably helps with temperature regulation and airflow. And they also had a really nice nest and roosting setup. So we're going to go over to 2 short videos to show you inside the coop. This is their food and water system, which I was really impressed with. It's a little bit different. It's similar to a food and water system that I had been considering, and was on my list of ideal things to do for our own flock. Um, so you see the water bucket over there on the left. They have the cup-shaped chicken nipples. That's what they're called, which lets them, they peck a little thing and it uh, spills water out into the cup so then they can easily drink it. There are a variety of different designs of chicken nipples, but this one, the cup seems to be preferred by some hens who are used to drinking out of dishes or just regular regular chicken water setups. And on the right is that bucket is full of pellets, and you can see that they stick their head in the little hole there to peck the food inside, and there's a bit of an interior design. So when they stick their head in there, there's a handful of pellets that they can bite, and then it just automatically um, refills. And so we would lower this bucket down for them to access it in the morning, and then after a few hours when they've had their fill, we would raise it back up. And both of those things, the small entrance as well as the raising and lowering, are going to keep mice and other pests from getting into the food. So this is a really good setup. My ideal setup did not involve buckets, but rather PVC pipes. But I definitely give them kudos for their water and food setup. And here is a little video of the hens enjoying themselves. So somehow I managed to not get any photos of their roost and nest area, but I do have a short video so you can see their roosts on the left, their nice wooden nesting boxes on the right, and the wood shavings throughout. And at the end of this clip, you'll be able to see that their sleeping and nesting area is separated by a door from the rest of the interior of the coop. That lady had just laid her egg, so that was her egg song. Okay, we're going to run through a few photos here so you can see this small flock's daily routine. They started out their day by waiting at the door of their coop for me to open it up for them as shortly after sunrise as possible. And while I would go in the coop and lower their food down, and they're obviously hungry in the morning, they would not go for their food first. They would run right past the door, head down the patio steps, and seek out the few berries, the little fruits that had fallen off this large cactus above this patio. So here we see a lady eyeing that little piece there. It's some sort of cactus fruit, and she grabs it. And only after they've decided that they've found all the fruits that fell overnight, then they would go back in their coop and eat breakfast. And this little lady says, "More fruit, please." After they eat breakfast, they would lay their eggs. I would collect the eggs, and then they would come hang out. And this is the only part of their yard that was visibly torn up, scratched up. Plants weren't really growing well because the hens spent most of their day here. They have this entire huge yard to hang out in, but it's all just serene and beautiful and growing great. So these hens are somehow didn't tear everything up. Later in the afternoon, this part of the patio would get hot, and so they would go hang out in the other part of the yard where all the cactuses are, which is where I got most of their portraits. They were giving me their good sides, their model faces. Look at that face. And once in a while, a cactus pad would fall to the ground, and they enjoyed slowly pecking at those over the course of the afternoon. We did have one small hiccup while we were at this house sit. One of the hens hurt her foot. So I will show you a short video that I took when I saw the hen sitting on the ground like this. This is a telltale sign that something is not right with the chicken. So chickens are very active birds, and while they do sit and preen and dust bathe and nap, there's a certain way that they sort of hunker on the ground that you know something's not right. You can see she appears to have a little bit of labored breathing as well. After looking her over, we determined that it was one of her feet that was bothering her, which initially, even though we still had to figure out how her foot was injured, was a great relief because she looked visually, you know, my first thought is, you know, hopefully she's not egg-bound. But the way she was limping, and even though there was no discoloration, no signs of bumblefoot, no external visible injury, one of her feet was quite swollen. I would say when the first time I looked at her injured foot, it was almost double the size of her other foot. So basically it was a chicken version of a sprained ankle. The only question was something broken or not, and that didn't seem to be the case. So we got in touch with the house sit hosts, and they sounded a little concerned about bumblefoot, so they said, how about you put a disinfectant on her foot just in case? And that gave us an opportunity to visually check her foot a second time. We still didn't see any signs of bumblefoot, but it's better safe than sorry. So we put a disinfectant on her foot and then just monitored her. And she was in good spirits despite just really having a hard time getting around. So I carried her to a few places the first day that I knew she would want to go in order to stay with the rest of her flock. And I would say within about 4 days, she was back to herself. So the first few days, she was not sleeping on the roost. She was sleeping next to the nesting boxes. She was also laying her eggs next to the nesting boxes. She wasn't able to get up in them, wasn't able to hop over to the roost. She knew that was going to hurt her leg. So she was really doing as best as she could to follow her routine as closely as possible, while also not making her injury any worse. So she did a really good job taking it easy, and again, it was only just a few days until she was completely back to normal. To end here, I'm going to show a few more pictures of Guanajuato, and I do have to say it's one of our top 5 cities that we visited so far, out of 15 states in Mexico so far. We definitely would like to visit Guanajuato again. It's a super unique landscape in that the city is so hilly that there's just not only flights of stairs everywhere, houses built all up and down the sides of hills, tops of hills, but there's also a really complex network of tunnels going through the hills for walking and driving. So just the very up and down and through the mountain, it's really cool to just walk around and explore. Also, it's a really unique climate. The house sit hosts explained that it is such a climate that most people don't need heaters or air conditioners. You can just use opening and closing your windows at certain points of day to control your airflow and your temperature. So year-round, heaters and air conditioning is not usually required. And of course, just beautiful architecture and color throughout the city, lots of historic buildings. Very easy to see why Guanajuato is a popular tourist destination for both those outside of Mexico and for those who live in Mexico. So that was house sit number 2 in Guanajuato City in Guanajuato. Thanks for watching, and coming up next, we'll talk about house sit number 3.